Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you to Mike and Patty for showing us how to plant a butterfly garden. We have with us now, joining us is Bob Allen, our good friend and colleague. Bob is the lead author of Wildflowers of Orange County and the Santa Ana Mountains, and he's going to present with us today his presentation entitled, What's So Special About Monarch Butterflies? Take it away, Bob.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Good to see you. My talk today is titled, What's So Special About Monarchs? My talk is sponsored by Tree of Life Nursery, my good friends over there. We'll talk about adult monarchs, migration, relatives and lookalikes, the life cycle of monarchs, meet the milkweeds, and also try to get you to plant native milkweeds and things that the adult butterflies will feed on. First off, adult monarchs have orange. They're mostly orange with black and some white. On the left is a male. They have thin bands of black scales on the wing veins and what's called an androconal patch on the second cubital vein. If you can see my pointer, it's right down here by the abdomen. That's where the patch is. Here's a female on the right. She has thicker bands of black scales that follow the veins. So compare those as you see. She's also more of an orange color, where the male's got a little bit more yellow in him, and she does not have the androconal patches. Monarchs are famous for migration. Those on the east of the Rocky Mountains migrate in the wintertime and end up in Mexico. They spend the whole winter down there in a forest, and then when spring arrives, they start heading northbound, but they stay pretty much to the east of the Rocky Mountains. Here in California, our population is termed the Western population, and they are west of the Rockies. Most of the butterflies west of the Rockies do not go to Mexico. Yeah, a few have ended up down there, but mostly they come south, they hit the coast of California, and they spend the winter there. You can see in this nice map from Xerces that there's an orange band right here where they follow, and they're normally along in the wintertime spending the night on trees within a mile or maybe 5 miles of the coast. This is what they look like when they overwinter on the trees. A lot of them with their wings closed at night, they look like dead leaves. Then when the sun hits them in the morning, they open their wings up. They may or may not fly for the day. Here is a relative of the monarch. On the right, we see the queen. The queen's native to our deserts, and she feeds on, as caterpillar, feeds on milkweeds that are native to the desert, but she will come over the mountains and end up in Orange County, in San Diego, and LA, Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo counties during the summer. They'll show up, sometimes fall. They're not uncommon here at all. These two queens were photographed right here in Orange County. You can tell them apart by the patterns we went over with the male, and then on the queen, you can see males and females are both burnt orange, much darker burnt orange than male or female of the monarch. Queens are also smaller on average. There are some lookalikes, and people often get these mistaken. So in the upper left, we see a monarch, and the upper right, we see a painted lady, which lives all across the United States and Mexico. And you look for these wing bars right in here, the front wings, right in here. We're looking at these spots. So painted lady has these kind of square-looking white wing bars here. On the West Coast lady, which only lives along the West Coast, she's got orange in the same place, so she's very, very different. On the American lady, orange in those bars right here. The pattern of black right in this area is very, very different between this. On the underside, all three of these look very, very different. Notice in the monarch too that this area right here, called the discal cell, has no markings inside of it. This is a vein here, there's a couple of veins going here, but there's no markings inside. When in all the ladies, that same discal cell is right here, and there's markings inside of the discal cell. So a quick and easy way to look for it. Markings in the discal cell and blue spots, sometimes all black, on the hind wings also denotes a lady, where monarchs never have blue on them. Now, monarch life cycle, fairly straightforward butterfly life cycle. The egg is laid on milkweed, we'll get there in a minute. The egg hatches, the caterpillar crawls around, feeding on the milkweed plants, grows, sheds its skin, grows, sheds its skin, does this 5 times. And finally, the last time it sheds, it reveals a chrysalis, this nice green chrysalis. And then when it's close to eclosing or emerging from the chrysalis itself turns clear and you can see the monarch inside. And then it emerges from the chrysalis, or it closes, dries the wings, flies around, mates very soon, and then the female starts laying eggs on milkweed and starts the cycle all over again. Monarch adults only live from about 1 to 3 months. They're not a super long-lived butterfly. And their caterpillars only feed on milkweeds, mostly the genus Asclepius, but there are some other genera. Our 3 very common local species are the narrow-leaved milkweed that has white flowers, sometimes with some pink, really skinny leaves. The California milkweed, maroon flowers, very hairy. The leaves are in pairs. It's mostly in dry areas of coastal sage scrub and chaparral, higher up in the Santa Ana Mountains. It's not a low elevation plant at all. And then woolly fruited milkweed, this is a much lower elevation plant. It too has white flowers, sometimes with a little bit of pink in them, very wide leaves in groups of 2s or 3s or 4s. You find it at Casper's Wilderness Park, along Ortega Highway, a lot of places like that. In Northern California and across other parts of the US, we have showy milkweed, which is white and or pink flowers. It is reported from Northern California. It will grow here in Southern California, but it does need some shade at least part of the day. The other 3 milkweeds that are native right here in Orange County can handle full sun all day, and that's where you plant them if you were going to use them in a garden. Showy milkweed should be put somewhere near a tree or shrubs where it gets about half a day worth of shade. This is bloodflower, also called tropical milkweed. A lot of people will plant this one. A lot of nurseries sell it. Not a good idea, because what happens with this is the plant grows all year round. The native milkweeds here die off in late fall, die off down to the ground, and then in spring they start growing again. Well, what happens with these guys is that monarchs sometimes have on their bodies spores of a protozoan parasite called OE for short. And you can see in the picture of the egg down here, the monarch egg, there are little tiny spores all over that egg. They're really small, very hard to find. They're kind of rust colored. They're shaped like an American football. So what happens with this is the egg hatches. The young, first thing the young does in most butterflies, it turns around and it feeds on the eggshell of its own egg. It's its first meal. They'll get the spores on and in the body. The protozoan emerges from the spore, starts to reproduce, and it can affect the caterpillar. It can kill the caterpillar outright. It can also mess up its digestive system. It can do all kinds of things to it. Sometimes when the caterpillar enters the pupal stage, it never emerges. It just turns black and it dies in there. Or when it ecloses, comes out of the chrysalis shell, it's deformed and of course dies. Some adults, if they do make it to what looks to be a fully functioning adult, they'll be underweight and too weak to fly very well. They're pretty obvious when you see them. And so it's a nasty thing. So what happens with this plant? Because it grows year round, monarchs will lay eggs on it all year round. And if the protozoans on the body of the butterfly, which does happen, the protozoan spores get rubbed off onto the plant, and now the plant is infective and a caterpillar can eat it. So our native milkweeds, because they die off in late fall, early winter, that dead stem that falls over doesn't present an infection source to the monarchs that come in the spring that lay eggs on the new growth of the milkweed. So really, if you shouldn't plant this one, but if you have planted it, don't worry. You don't have to take it out as long as you follow some simple steps. And that is, cut it to the ground by the end of October. Leave it not growing. Don't let it regrow. If it starts to regrow, cut it down to the ground. Don't let it regrow until about March 1. Then it will be fine. Make sure any old stalks are disposed of in the trash, not your compost bin, put them in the trash, not your green waste bin, put them in the trash. And that will help lower the infection. This parasite's been studied by a lot of researchers. Most recently was Dara Satterfield, who looked at this, and she proved that, that these are a problem. Her dissertation is available, or I think papers she's written have been available. Xerces Society has now written this, the Monarch Joint Venture newsletter. They talk about tropical milkweed and the parasite. Here's a butterfly laying eggs on tropical milkweed here. Here's some of the spores, a little close up. Here's what a butterfly infected with it looks like. Again, sometimes they look fine and they can fly. Other times they don't. So here's the advice. You either plant milkweeds native to your area or your state. Cut down the non-native milkweeds to the ground on November 1, and then keep them cut till March 1. And that will really help knock this infection back. So if you really, really like the tropical milkweed, take those precautions. That will really help out the butterflies. This parasite is known to really harm butterfly populations. We don't know if this is the #1 reason why monarch numbers have declined, but it definitely is a contributing factor. So please do your part, either plant a native species or do your responsibility as a gardener and cut these things down by these dates. A question I am asked quite often, what to do if your caterpillars eat all your milkweed? Well, if they're young caterpillars, you must find more milkweed. Contact nurseries. Tree of Life Nursery is a great source for milkweed plants. Some other nurseries are now carrying it as well. But the young caterpillars have to feed on milkweed. If the caterpillars are older, we call that a late instar, they're fine without milkweed, but they do need to eat something, and they'll eat cantaloupe, pumpkin, and other squashes. And you can see in this picture, someone's raised them out and just feeding them that, and they do fine. So have at. You can always get those. Now, why are monarchs in peril? Well, the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation counts overwintering monarchs in California right around Thanksgiving, patterned after the Audubon bird counts. And they came up with a statement from this effort of just doing the same counts in the same place every year at Thanksgiving, right around Thanksgiving time. From this effort, we know that the Western monarch population has undergone a 74% decline over the past 20 years. Used to be in San Clemente State Beach, we'd have 20,000 or more monarchs spending the winter on the trees just at that one place. And now, not so many. In fact, here is a nice graph for the state. This is from 2015. We do have more data, but it's a nice graph I have. 1997, monarch numbers in California were over 1.2 million overwintering. And then it started to decline in 1998, less than 600,000, down to, what is that, about 230,000. And then here, a little bit back up in 2000, and down, 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 down. 2015, the numbers were, looks to be about under 300,000. And then jumping ahead to 2018, just for Orange County, the big graph is for the whole state, just Orange County, in 2018, I observed 0 overwintering monarchs in all of Orange County. In 2019, I observed 3 at San Clemente State Beach. That was it. That was it. I am the volunteer coordinator for the Xerces Society here for Orange County, California. So I did those surveys myself. I've been dealing with monarchs since I was a very little kid, and I know where all the overwintering grounds are, and it's really disheartening. The numbers are way, way down. Why are they down? We're not totally sure. Well, there are threats, and the threats are habitat destruction. So here we have a picture of a bulldozer bulldozing out habitat, and this is happening all over California. If there's a bulldozer there, if we have habitat conversion to homes or schools or buildings or stores, that means there's no milkweed growing there. If there's no milkweed, there's nothing for the caterpillars to eat. The adults have nothing to lay eggs on. The young have no milkweed, so there's not going to be a young generation. Pesticides are a huge problem. We are using a lot of pesticides. And here we see a picture of a farm where pesticides are being used. See the fumes of the pesticide? That's called pesticide drift. It flies over, makes its way to where it was not intended to go. So that's called pesticide drift. So a farmer might spray their crops, but some of the pesticide drifts over to a natural area and kills the plants that are there or kills the insects that are there. And now you've got no monarchs. Another pesticide source are homeowners. We're very guilty of this. Funny that You need a driver's license to drive a car, but you don't need a license to spray poison in your own backyard. It's amazing. Commercial applicators require a license. They require education, regular renewals of the education, and a license. And they have to register how much they use and when and why with the state. But homeowners, well, they can spray methyl ethyl death on anything, anytime they want. Huge problem, huge problem. Another thing is we have non-native milkweed and the parasite OE I've talked about before. Over in the far right, there's a picture of a monarch trying to emerge from the chrysalis, but it's badly deformed and just dies on the spot. This monarch was infected with OE. And then we have the last one, lack of adult nectar sources. So not only do we not have enough plants for the milkweed plants, for the young to feed on, there's no nectar for the adults to feed on. Adults need nectar. So what can we do about this? Well, there's lots of things we could do. First off, we need to preserve some habitat. We can't make everything look like a concrete jungle. We need to have natural areas set aside, like this picture of beautiful Casper's Wilderness Park here in Orange County, where lots of milkweed lives. It's a fantastic place. They have monarchs, they have milkweed, they have open space, they have nectar sources for everything. It's just a great place. So we need to just back off on the pesticides. Homeowners don't need to use pesticides. The only thing you might need a pesticide for is using a bait for ants that get in your house and also treating cockroaches that get in your house. But outside, why would you need pesticides? Fine, you've got a couple of grasshoppers. Let them eat some leaves. It's not an infestation. So we need to be pesticide free. If you care about having the butterflies, you need to drop the pesticides. You need to plant some native milkweed, like these beautiful milkweeds here, and that brings in the butterflies. Monarchs do like the nectar from milkweed. And then we need some adult nectar sources, like the one in the center bottom here. It's really fun to watch a butterfly feed. So in the spring and summer, there's some great plants to use that help to feed the adult butterflies. Things like the milkweeds, woolly fruited milkweed, narrow-leaved milkweed, showy milkweed. I showed you those, also on screen. White yarrow, lower left corner. California buckwheat, upper left corner, including that beautiful little blue butterfly there. Its caterpillars feed on the leaves of buckwheat and the adults feed on the nectar, so you can bring in those little butterflies. Sages, such as white sage in the upper right, black sage, lower right, and Cleveland sage, kind of center, just off right. Those are fantastic sources of nectar for all kinds of butterflies, monarchs and others. And also verbena, your lower left toward the center, this is verbena lilacina, cultivar called Delamina. Verbena lilacina is from Cedros Island in Baja, California. So it's not quite native right here, but it's pretty close. We do have some native species of verbena here. Their flowers aren't as big, but this thing is fantastic. I call this a monarch magnet. It really brings them in. They love this stuff. Lots of butterflies do. So these are all great plants for you to use. And then what about fall? We often forget about putting in fall blooming wildflowers for butterflies, such as the monarch. And so things that bloom in the fall are things like native thistles. No, not those non-native things that got in. We have two species of native thistle right here, and they're fantastic, just beautiful. One has a pink flower, like in the upper left. Another has a red-purple flower. I don't have a picture on screen. They're both in my book. Also, thistles are visited by our state butterfly, the California dogface. That's the one right below the monarch picture there. Dogfaces go crazy for purple flowers, and they really like thistles. So both of these butterflies will visit all of these flowers. So we have things like coastal golden bush, lower left corner. It's not even in bloom yet. It's almost in bloom. And then rabbit brush, next over from that, which isn't quite in bloom too, but should be in August. Goldenrod, center, starts blooming in late spring and goes through the summer and part of the fall. Sandwash butterweed, with gray leaves, second from right, underused plant. People just don't plant this. It's gorgeous. Casper's Wilderness Park has got several in the creek bed there. You can just look at them, marvel at how beautiful they are. Various asters, that is a genus and a group of the sunflower family, like lower right corner here, the asters, great things. They really bring in a lot of butterflies. And then upper right, common sunflower, the native sunflower. Yeah, that's right. It's native to right here. It's the only plant native to North America that's grown around the world for food. Yeah. What you want to do is get the native form of it, the native genotype, which is right there in that picture. They don't have the giant sunflower heads. Their heads are about this big. That's the normal form of it. Humans have selected for those giant heads that you see, like in Russian giant. Yeah, they're beautiful, but I'd rather see you use the native form of this. It will bring in native butterflies as well. These are all great choices. And there are some non-natives that are worth having in your garden too. Even if you have an all-native garden, these are terrific flowers that bring in a lot of butterflies, including monarchs. They will visit these. An ongoing study at University of California, Davis, has shown that these 4 are the best flowers to put in your garden. Sorry, the best non-native flowers to put in your garden. Cosmos pinnata is native to Mexico. That's not that far away. Coneflower, Echinacea, many species in that group, native to the Great Plains all the way to the East Coast and the South, fantastic plant. Gaillardia, the blanket flower, several things come to that. Black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia, another beautiful plant. Oh my gosh, I was just at one of my local nurseries today, a real live nursery, and they had all of these, just beautiful. Actually bought 3 of them. It was great to put in my garden. They're fantastic nectar sources. They really are worth having in your garden. Even if you have an all-native garden like I do, I have a rule, if it's non-native, it goes in a nice big pot. And that's where these are going to go. And I'd like to thank you for hanging around. And we're going to take it back to Kevin.
Okay, well, thank you, Bob. That was a fantastic presentation. And this was a great example. And I like how you mentioned a lot of information in there on what people can do to help this very charismatic butterfly. And one thing you mentioned, and maybe you could reiterate that message, because I think it's very valid and very important that we get that word out there. What can people do to help this butterfly?
Well, as I mentioned in the talk, there's always more to talk about, but time, you can avoid using pesticides on your property. It turns out, looking at pesticides, people use pesticides to get rid of pests that attack their non-native plants, right? So people plant non-natives and then be surprised that non-native pests, by the way, the pests in your garden are not native pests. They're not native species, right? So we have non-native species acting as pests on non-native species of plants that you put in, and now you want a pesticide to come in and kill all that. Well, it kills everything. So really, the best thing to do is plant nothing but native plants, problem solved. You're not going to get, for the most part, you're not going to get non-native pests attacking your native plants. So come in, plant native plants, put in some native species of milkweed, and I'm going to use native milkweed in the broad sense and say that the showy milkweed from Northern California, perfectly fine. Give it a shot, give it a little bit of shade too, seems to do better. But put them all in your garden. And just one plant is never enough with milkweed. You really need to get a handful of them. I've got about 6 in my front yard and I get caterpillars on them. More the merrier. Because if there's only one plant, it's going to be very hard for her to find that one plant. So,
well, I couldn't, yes, Bob, I couldn't agree more. And even though I work here at Tree of Life, it is very important that you plant the native plants. It comes back, it does a lot for the wildlife around, including this species as well. That we have noticed a lot more, or we have a lot of people who really want to get involved and help plant for the monarch butterfly, and they come in. The popularity of people looking for the native milkweeds has definitely increased. So we have ramped up our production, and we have many of these native species available now, including inside this butterfly bundle in our 4-inch containers, but we also have some larger sizes as well. So if you have caterpillars, we have the food sources available for you. And we include and have a lot of other species that Bob mentioned in his talk. and a few other that we have a wide selection of plants that will also provide the nectar for those, for not only the monarch butterfly, but many of other species as well. So Bob, I thank you so much for joining us, and we always love it when we see you here around the nursery, but a Zoom call is also a wonderful way to see you as well. It's not the same. So thank you, Bob, and thank you for everyone who joined us today, and all of those watching with the Festival of the Butterflies. Thank you, and come on down to Tree of Life. We are open, and we would love to see you soon. So thank you, and we wish you all the best.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.